Joining us now from one of your favorite, and I know it's one of your favorite publications because you always send me stories. You know who you are, from the Epoch Times. I am a subscriber, and it's an amazing piece of journalism. Nan Su is senior correspondent for the Epoch Times. Thank you so much for dropping by and visiting with us. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me today.
I say it's an important piece of journalism because years ago, you were in the center square of all the conspiracy theories, all the people getting canceled off of the internet, the people saying, "Oh, do you know who those people are?" And you know, you can't take anything they say seriously. Who are these Epoch Times reporters? What do they know? It's all a conspiracy theory. And funny, here we are 3 years later, and pretty much everything you published 3 years ago has come true and has been proven to have been factual. Is there some gratification in that, or do you feel like jumping up and down and saying, "I told you so, pay attention now"?
Well, that was it, right? Remember 3 years ago?
Yeah.
It was a CPAC 3 years ago, February of 2020. We were talking about the coming pandemic. You know, you remember the reaction of the people at those times? They said, "Excuse me, are you using the wrong word? Are you talking about the epidemic?" No, it was a pandemic that was coming. Right, so now 3 years later, like almost 700 million people, close to 700 million people, right, infected, and close to 7 million people die because of this pandemic. So we are here again talk about, you know, that right now it's only in the recent 1 or 2 weeks they're really talking about going deeper for the investigation of the origin of this virus.
Well, we finally admitted that it was man-made in a lab. I still want to see Rand Paul has these receipts that seem to make it look like we paid for it, or we're at least paying for some of it. But we have a working theory, and my listeners and I have created a new phrase. We're not conspiracy theorists, we're conspiracy analysts. And it is our discussion point right now that, okay, they finally admitted we have government reports that say this was man-made in a lab in the Wuhan province. Whether or not it came out intentionally or not, we can put a pin in that. But once it was out, the behavior of the Chinese Communist Party regarding travel of the citizens, both of the Wuhan precinct, the region, banning them from traveling to other parts of China, but not stopping them from traveling to the world. There's a theory amongst my listeners, and I give it some credence, that once it was out, the Chinese communists said, well, if our economy is going to be devastated, let's take everyone else's out with it. Is there anything in what you've covered that would give credence to that idea that once the pandemic had started in China, they're like, well, we better make sure all the other factories get shut down, not just ours?
Well, I think, first of all, it's hard to, define the real, what's the real strategy behind that. So first of all, I would say, the investigation definitely need to be conducted, and with the highest level of authority, and then with a lot of resource that's invested into the investigation. Now there's there are a few things. My 3 years is not a very long time, but a lot of details are being forgot.
Okay.
Right. Let's go back to review this. On December 31st of 2019, right? Mm-hmm. So there's 8 Chinese doctors came forward and sent out a private message through their personal social media platform. Say there's a SARS outbreak. They don't know where it is yet, but 8 doctors in Wuhan. They say because 2003 Chinese communist regime cover up the SARS outbreak. Remember, so they say there's a possibility another SARS outbreak. It's coming. It's happening right now. Pay attention. So what happened? They all immediately arrested, detained by Wuhan authority, by Wuhan police, and then they were only released after they signed a statement. Force being committed, they were spreading rumors and forced to promise They're not going to do it anymore.
Gee.
And then one of the Dr. Li Wenliang, later become a national hero considered by Chinese people, not the Chinese regime, but Chinese people. He died on February 13th of 2020 because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before he died, he put out the statement the police authority forced him to sign on his social media platform. So basically, we still have the copy. That's
Which is ostensibly a deathbed confession that, hey, I was forced to do this.
right. And then until January 16th, the Chinese CDC, National CDC China, still say, it's not going to be infected like in the way of person to person.
Right.
Now, another important event, let's not to forget, January 18th, that's 2 days after that announcement made by Chinese CDC, Wuhan city has its annual 10,000 families banquet. It's a 10,000 families banquet. Not 10,000 people, it's a 10,000 families banquet. It's a parlor style to welcome the coming New Year. So remember, there was like tens of thousands of people waiting the long line. They eat together, chat together, right?
Yeah, we saw it in the national, even CNN and places like, oh, look, nothing must be going wrong here. They're all having a big party.
Right. So, and then only 5 days later, on the 23rd of January, they locked down the Wuhan city. Only 5 days later, but they only locked down the flights going out or vehicles going out from Wuhan city inside of China, domestic flights.
Mm-hmm.
But people from Wuhan fly all around the world until another 5 days later, and January 25th. Okay, now, I'm sorry, I put a date down. January 23rd was the day they locked down. And then 2 days later, only 2 days later after they locked down, Wuhan Virology Institute,
Mm-hmm.
that's, they send China's top biowarfare general, Chen Wei, that's Dr. Chen Wei, China's top biowarfare general that take over charge of the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
That was another thing that we were all told, oh, no, that's not what he is. That's not what he is. He's just China's version of Tony Fauci. He's not a general. It's not bioweapons and things like that.
She is a general. Well, we know that, right? She had a general rank on her shoulder. We know that, right?
Right.
And then, so now that's what we talked about back in February of 2020. We were here warning people the pandemic is coming. The really funny thing was, I remember I was one of the radio show here. They have actually call in. They have a caller say, hey, this COVID is something that only Asian people is going to get it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, whistling past the graveyard. So we're visiting with Nan Su, senior correspondent from the Epoch Times. So we're seeing now, we're finally finding out little bits. I think we're way from finding out all the things that went on at this lab in Wuhan. I think we're probably going to have a lot of stonewalling because of American taxpayers going there for whatever they were doing that may have led to it. Whether we paid for the SARS-CoV-2 or we just paid for gain-of-function research and they were industrious and tried it on some other things, we still don't know. But where are we today with this? Because, we're
not really moving any further from the information that we have 3 years ago. Now,
has China just gotten better at covering up?
Well, if you yesterday, actually, based on what I read, there was a spokesperson from the from our government. Basically, they want to take the investigation more seriously. That's the only thing so far we.
Well,
it's still
thank
some
goodness,
sort of a promise.
How many millions later? So when the president is invoking a war powers bill that is going to authorize him to pay, forgive all these student loans because of COVID. I've made the case that that seems to be an admission that this was a weapon. We were attacked, and that we all became soldiers in this war against COVID, because there is a lot of science, back engineering science, that says this looks like what you would do if you wanted to weaponize something. You mentioned their top bioweapons general was sent to the Wuhan Institute. How much credence should we give that story? And remembering that these are the things that'll get you banned on Twitter and Facebook, but then 3 years later you'll be right. So you can have some confidence that 3 years from now all your friends will be able to find you again. What credence should we give the military's involvement in this lab?
Well, the only thing I want to remind Americans, I think a lot of Americans have not even heard about the term called unrestricted and unconventional warfare. I'm not sure if people actually understand
I don't like the phrase. I don't like the way it sounds.
Well, this is a strategy that was invented by Chinese military strategists in the mid-90s. In the mid-90s, considering they always, think that America is the number one enemy of that military, Chinese military. So they invent this kind of strategy. Basically, unrestricted or unconventional warfare. It's a warfare without any form. Regardless, it would take any forms they could without a moral bottom line. And it includes economic warfare, technological warfare, cultural warfare. It takes any form. And so most of our Americans have not realized that, the Chinese military or Chinese communist regime has been involved with us for almost 30 years, since the mid-90s. So the only warfare so far has not taken place. It's the military warfare. And it's quickly approaching us right now.
I remember there was a book published, I think it was in the 90s, and it may have been based on this. And it said, the premise of it, I can't remember the title, was that in the next World War was not going to be fought with bullets and bombs, but with dollars and yuan. And that it was going to be a battle, an economic battle. And back then, everyone was like, well, no, it's not. China's not going to be the one fighting with us. It was going to be Japan or someone else. But we've really seen this idea that Mao created, this idea that China must engulf and the culture must take over the globe, is manifest now. What should Americans be worried about? We're buying our pharmaceuticals from China. We're manufacturing all of our products in China. We're still woven into that. How do we unweave that so that we can defend ourselves?
The first thing is, I think there's a very important thing, as you just mentioned, from Chairman Mao. But I want to make it really clear for people, this is a communist culture. This is not the traditional Chinese culture. There's no traditional Chinese culture anymore in China. It's been wiped out ever since the Cultural Revolution between 66 to 76, 10 years in China. So it's a communism that's coming around from China. That's what they are exporting right now all around the world. And I think that technology, I think our congressional leaders need to make a move, not yesterday, not last month, not last year, supposed to be 10 years ago. We need to make legislation as soon as possible to stop the investment from United States to China on all the high-tech industries. Now, think about this. Think about there was one question I always ask Americans to think about it. The U.S. direct investment to China last year, total, until last year, total was close to 120 billion. That's from United States alone. Now, think about the entire Western world. How many hundreds of billions of dollars we invested in China? Now, ask yourself a question. During the Cold War time, if the Western world invested hundreds of billions of dollars in former Soviet Union, would Soviet Union have ever collapsed? would Soviet Union have ever had the reform leader of Gorbachev?
No, never. I mean,
Think about this. We do it to ourselves. We need to think about there's a lot of things we can do here in the United States.
We're visiting with Nan Su, senior correspondent at the Epoch Times. I have to bring this up because while this is all going on, oh, hold it, who's that guy in Moscow? President Xi's in Moscow saying,
Well, stop, please. Don't call him President Xi. That's
oh, I'm sorry.
supposed to call him Chairman Xi. Now,
I'm sorry.
No. It's not your fault. It's basically some of the people in our media. See, chairman and president are totally two different words in Chinese. Chairman Xi is the title he used to call himself in China, and that's how 1.4 billion Chinese people call him in China. But somehow when he came to the West, somebody in our media, who he is, and then he invent this President Xi.
Oh,
so everybody.
We have a president. You have, chairman sounds so much more dire.
Well, in English vocabulary, president it's a elected leader. Chairman it's not.
Right, exactly. And chairman has a lot more dictatorial powers.
It's designated power by a regime.
Yeah. So Chairman Xi is all of a sudden in Moscow saying, I want to be the peacemaker. And I've been referring to his plan as the Belt and Road Peace Agreement. He wants to come in and do for Ukraine, I'm sure, what he's done for Northern Italy and Sub-Saharan Africa and all the other places the Belt and Road Initiative has been applied there. Meanwhile, we're the ones, and he's saying, oh, the Americans just want war for their war machine, and we seem to have egg on our face because it's hard to prove otherwise, while the president wants to send more billions of dollars to a regime in Ukraine that said, I'd love to hear what President or Chairman Xi wants to say. All of a sudden, we're out here with all our, guns and planes and saying, hold it, where's the war? Even Zelensky said, let's go talk to the Chinese then. Were we played in this?
Well, yesterday, actually, James Robin from our State Department, basically, Chinese Communist regime has spent billions of dollars for disinformation of Ukraine war, to spread around disinformation about Ukraine war. We are actually, U.S. government is late kind of, to deal with that kind of effect. And think about that, the peace proposal, the Chinese Communist regime brought 12 points of peace proposal. Now, if you really understand the message, it's hiding there. What they really want, it's the technology from us. Now, what they say, they have a 12 points peace proposal. Now, most of the things they talk about, it's empty words, like, to rebuild Ukraine after the war, right?
Right.
To pay respect to everybody's sovereignty. Now, they didn't say pay respect to Ukraine's sovereignty. They say everybody's sovereignty. Now, right? Yeah. Now, all those things is empty words, but it really comes down, this is what they want. Number one, they say stop the Cold War thinking. Stop the unilateral sanction. And they didn't say against whom. Now, if you go back to the Munich Global Security Conference, which is like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Now, Chinese top diplomat Wang Yi really states three things. When he went to the media room, around by all the top diplomats, all from all countries, and the media from all countries around the world, he says three things. Number one, he said that the U.S. government shooting down the spy balloon of China was against the international rule because that's a civilian balloon. That's what he said. That's number one. Number two, he said, the only reason that the Ukraine war lasted for so long was because the U.S. keep providing weapons to Ukraine military. And number three, very important, this is come down to what they are trying to ask from U.S. government and the Western world. They say, He blamed United States the recent effort in the past couple years to put a sanction on the semiconductor, high tech on China. See, this is what they really want. This is what they really want from that peace proposal. This is the price they want us to pay. Now, think about this. If we keep giving them, this is why I say, yes, it should be done. Many years ago, we should have a legislation to ban, all the technology, not just the, high tech, all the technology going to China, all the investment going to China, investing in high tech industry.
So when Mark Warner has the CHIPS Act here in Virginia, does that help, or is that just a Band-Aid? Mark Warner, our U.S. Senator Mark Warner, has an act called the CHIPS Act, which is going to be federal subsidies, taxpayer subsidies to chip manufacturers if they make chips in the United States.
Yeah, it's a great message that we need to have done it long time ago. So now you can see the chip manufacturers from Taiwan, from South Korea, they're all coming to the United States, which will secure our supply chain here if there is a war, that's coming. And also, we need to do the same thing, not just only the technology on the tech, the protections on technology industry and manufacture here, but also our supply chain of drug industry.
Right.
Our medicines, a lot of them actually originally made in China.
Right. And how much, because this came up yesterday's program, a listener was asking about this. Because I warned, the manufacturer, we've got to understand that manufacturing something in the United States is going to increase the cost to a great degree because we won't address our labor laws. I don't know what the labor laws look like in China. It sure looks like here's a box to live in, go work in the factory, and so our American companies can make things so much cheaper there. How do we grasp that? Because we have to fight that battle. It's an economic battle. We have to bring those things back, but we also have to make sure they're affordable.
Well, it's a great question. Think about this. Supply chain wise, at least something we can do is to encourage our supply chain providers to get out of China. It doesn't have to come back to the United States. That's the bottom line. If they don't come back to the United States, at least they can be relocated to India. Can they do that? Well,
are they still our friends?
Well,
this day I'm wondering.
I think. Well, this is another fight we need to take care of, right? Southeast Asian countries, India, at least away from. It's much harder. Say if they want to start a bio warfare against us, by screw up our supply chain. At least those supply chain providers, they are not in China. They are not directly under the Chinese Communist regime, right?
And their supply chains didn't seem to be disrupted badly by COVID because they kept churning out the stuff, because they just had more people to assign to these jobs. And their human rights violations are things we have to stand up for. Anyway, Nan Su, I know there's other folks lining up to talk to you. I could talk to you all day. Thank you so much. Senior correspondent, Epoch Times, all those things that they said about Epoch Times 3 years ago. Ha, ha, ha. I know you're more gracious than that, but, boy, you've got to look back and say, what you were being yelled about 3 years ago versus where we are admitting it today. Thank you for everything. As Douglas Adams said, so long and thanks for all the fish, meaning, don't listen to us at your peril. And, thank you so much, sir. You have a great day.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Joe.
And that does it for us this week from Freedom and Prosperity Radio and the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. Don't forget our education event coming up on the 25th. My name is Joe Thomas, and for all of us here, until next week, so long and thanks for all the fish.